The midday sun cast a golden hue over the terminal of Liberty International Airport, where passengers bustled about, lost in their own worlds. Among them, Staff Sergeant Marcus Bell strode quietly, his well-worn duffel bag slung over his shoulder and his military ID hanging from a lanyard around his neck. He had just returned from a harrowing 8-month deployment overseas. His heart swelled with relief and longing. Relief that he had made it back alive, and longing to see his family again after enduring months of combat and loss. He was tired. His uniform, though pressed and immaculate, could not mask the fatigue lining his face or the burden in his eyes. But there was pride in his stride. He had served his country honorably and was finally home. As Marcus approached the security checkpoint, he moved as any passenger would, methodically. He slipped off his boots, placed his duffel bag on the conveyor belt, and stood patiently as he waited to pass through. Around him, the noise of the airport swirled. Announcements blared from the PA system, children giggled, and suitcases wheeled by. "Hey, you there! Stop!" The words snapped through the air like a whip. Marcus turned his head, his gaze settling on a security officer who was already moving toward him. Officer Stephen Cole was known around Liberty Airport as a man who took pride in his position, but not for the right reasons. His reputation for holding racially biased views was whispered about in staff lounges, though no one had yet dared to confront him openly. "What do you think you're doing?" Cole's voice was sharp, laced with suspicion as he planted himself in Marcus's path. Marcus straightened his posture, his hands at his sides. "I'm heading home, sir. Just returned from deployment." Cole's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing. "Deployment? Huh." He sneered, his gaze raking over Marcus's uniform as if it were a costume. "And where exactly were you deployed, Sergeant?" Marcus's jaw clenched briefly before he answered evenly. "Middle East. 8 months." Cole folded his arms. "You expect me to believe that? Someone like you?" The words stung, but Marcus remained composed. This wasn't his first time being treated like he didn't belong. He had dealt with prejudice before, but he had not expected to face it here, in uniform, on his homeland soil. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Marcus said quietly. "I just want to go home." Cole stepped closer, his body language aggressive. "Random check," he announced. "Step over here." Marcus sighed, his gaze scanning the crowd. Travelers moved past them, indifferent or unwilling to intervene. He complied, stepping aside as instructed, though unease settled heavy in his chest. Not far from them, Senior Officer Karen Whitman watched the exchange. Her brow furrowed as she noticed Cole's tone and behavior, but she hesitated. Karen had worked hard to climb the ranks in airport security and knew how Cole operated, but she had never openly challenged him. As Marcus stood still, his ID clutched in his hand, Cole circled him like a predator sizing up his prey. "You think wearing that uniform makes you somebody special?" he hissed under his breath. Marcus said nothing, keeping his gaze steady, his stance unmoving. The disdain in Cole's voice wasn't subtle. It was deliberate. Yet Marcus didn't react. He had faced enemies far worse than this man. But as the minutes passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. Cole suddenly grabbed Marcus's arm and shoved him hard against the cold wall behind them. The impact rattled through Marcus's back, but he remained on his feet, his breathing controlled. Heads turned. Some passengers froze, others looked away, and the airport security staff who witnessed it did nothing. "What the hell are you doing?" Marcus asked, his voice low and measured. Cole smirked. "Don't play innocent. You don't fool me." His words were daggers, but the silence from those around them was worse. Marcus's plea for fairness was met with indifference. Even Karen Whitman, who had watched the entire encounter, turned away. The betrayal of her silence cut deeper than Cole's shove. Marcus knew that reacting violently would play into Cole's hands. He took a breath and stood still. But Cole wasn't finished. He turned to his fellow officers and barked. "Non-compliant subject. Take him to the screening room." 3 officers hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances, but followed Cole's order. Marcus walked with them, his dignity intact, but the weight of injustice bore down on him. He was led into a small, sterile room. Metal walls, metal chairs, cold surfaces. Cole followed him in. "We're going to search you thoroughly," Cole said, already digging through Marcus's duffel bag. He rifled through Marcus's personal items before slipping his hand into his own pocket. In one swift move, he placed an old burner phone into a hidden compartment in Marcus's bag. "What is that?" Marcus demanded. Cole pulled the phone out with a smug grin. "Contraband," he announced. "You're carrying illegal devices." "You planted that," Marcus said firmly, his voice rising just slightly as anger burned inside him. "Check the cameras." Cole's eyes flickered with discomfort for a split second before he sneered. "There's nothing on those cameras that'll help you." Marcus knew the truth was on his side, but truth alone wasn't always enough, especially when others were too afraid to speak it. Outside the room, Karen paced, her conscience warring with her fear. She had seen the entire setup, knew what Cole had done, but speaking up meant putting her career on the line. Inside, Marcus sat still, his mind racing. He thought of his fellow soldiers who had died beside him, of his mother waiting at home for him to return, and of the country he had sworn to protect. He refused to let Cole bury him in lies. Pulling out his phone, he posted to social media. "Today at Liberty International Airport, I was humiliated, falsely accused, and treated like a criminal. I am a veteran, a soldier who served with honor for 10 years. I have done nothing wrong, but my uniform wasn't enough to protect me from hatred." He included a photo of his ID and uniform, then hit post. Within minutes, his story spread like wildfire. Comments of support flooded in. Hashtags trended. Hashtag justice for Marcus. Hashtag honor the uniform. Back inside the airport, Karen Whitman reviewed the surveillance footage herself. It was all there, Cole planting the phone. Karen made her decision. She emailed the footage to a civil rights organization and contacted her supervisor. By morning, the video was on national news. Cole was suspended immediately. He was later fired after a public outcry. Karen testified, as did another young officer, Daniel Ruiz, who had witnessed the scene but had been too afraid to intervene at first. Ruiz's conscience led him to step forward after seeing Marcus's courage. Marcus didn't stop there. With the help of a legal team from a veterans advocacy group, he sued both Cole and the airport authority. His case became a landmark trial on racial discrimination and abuse of power. When Marcus testified, he said, "This isn't about me. It's about every soldier who comes home to a country they fought for, only to be treated like they don't belong." The jury ruled in Marcus's favor. Cole faced criminal charges, and the airport authority was ordered to implement sweeping reforms. Mandatory anti-bias training, better accountability, transparent security procedures. As Marcus walked out of the courthouse after the verdict, he wasn't smiling in triumph. He was resolved. Beside him, Karen Whitman and Daniel Ruiz stood in solidarity, changed by what they had witnessed and the roles they had played. Months later, Marcus became an advocate for veterans' rights. He spoke at conferences and schools, urging young security officers to see the humanity in everyone they encounter. A uniform doesn't make someone less. We all carry our stories. We all deserve respect. In time, Marcus founded a nonprofit dedicated to supporting veterans transitioning back to civilian life. His story inspired reforms in airports across the country. But he never forgot that day at Liberty International. Not because it broke him, but because it showed him his strength, and because it taught everyone watching that one man's dignity, even under assault, can spark a movement.